Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us. Today's presentation is on the Campus Climate Survey, and I think we start off with our President Fuller giving some words of welcome. Dr. Fuller?
Great, Sybil. Thank you for that introduction and the time you've spent on this, and I want to thank your team for doing the work. This goes back to a set of surveys that was done in spring of last year, May and June of 2019. And then there was some initial analysis done over the summer and then reports in early fall. And as a result of those reports, there were just a lot of questions about what we could glean from the responses. And so with Sybil's leadership, we have a group of analysts who were able to dive into the data and pull out some of the findings you'll see here today being presented. And we have a real eclectic group of leaders on campus listening in. So my hope is that we'll have a chance to hear the findings and ask provocative questions, and then eventually develop next steps for improvement around campus climate and some of the issues that were addressed by the survey. And so, again, just my thanks to Sybil and Burl and Patrick for the work they've done through their excellent work in the center. And I think we'll be ready to hear the results and allow for questions as well. So with that, I want to turn it back to Sybil. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would like to introduce myself a little bit more to those who don't know me. I'm Dr. Sybil Guy. I'm the director of the Center on Evaluation, Technology, and Research, also known as CEDAR. And two of my team members were instrumental in putting the report and the presentation together. So I want to give them an opportunity to also introduce themselves. Beryl, would you start?
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Beryl Nikwe, a program evaluator with TRI, and I helped with the Campus Climate Survey. Even though I wasn't here when the survey began, I was part of the analysis. Thank you.
Patrick?
This is Patrick Aldridge. I'm a lead statistician here at TRI, and I also helped with the analysis and write-up of the Campus Climate Survey.
Okay. Now let's take it over to Rob, our provost. Rob?
Yeah, just a huge thanks to Dr. Sybil Guy, Pat Aldridge, Dr. Beryl Nikwe, and CEDAR, the Center on Evaluation, Technology, and Research. We have an extensive report here to run through. I think the actual report's over 190 pages, and they've done a great job putting together a PowerPoint. They've really applied a social science lens to this work. So not only have we been able to dig a little deeper into the data based on questions that we heard from faculty senate, staff senate, and others, we've also began to look at some possible interventions as possible next steps to maximize campus quality, campus climate quality here. So a huge thanks, and I look forward to the presentation. One final thing is you can submit questions to me directly, and we'll ask those questions at the end. So send me an email at provost@wou.edu. Once again, provost@wou.edu. Feel free to send those questions at any point. And at the end of the presentation, we'll read through some of those questions as time permits. So thank you. Back to you, Sybil.
Okay. So let's go straight into the presentation, please. Again, this is CEDAR's take and analysis on the Campus Climate Survey. This is just a little bit of background. Again, we undertook this work by invitation of President Fuller. The responses were collected last May and June, and 809 email invitations were sent out, and 409 responses came back. And then, like good social science researcher, we analyzed, we cleaned, and we played around with the data till we had a very clean data set that left us with 399 responses for the analysis. That's pretty much half of the email invitations that were sent out, and we consider this an extremely good response rate. And so we started working on a report, which is, as Rob just said, is a very long report and has all the details in it, including an executive summary with the large themes that we have identified and a lot of action items that we recommend the university undertakes. So this presentation, of course, can only give a few highlights because of limited time. So, but it does follow these recommended actions. So let's just take a quick look at what we did here. We broke it out. We had many conversations with Dr. Fuller, the provost, Judy over in HR, Ryan Hageman, executive teams of the staff senate, executive team of the faculty senate, and these are some groups that were really of interest to people. Let's look at gender differences between men and women, between also faculty and staff. Then also let's look at length of employment, which we then broke out for employees that were here for 5 or fewer years versus those who were here for a longer period of time. We also looked at employees of color, those were self-identified, also employees with disabilities, and employees also that self-identified as LGBT. So again, this was interest generated by Campus Conversations. And we also really took a deep dive into looking if the survey is representative. And if you look at the numbers here, you know, we broke it out by men and women. We compare it to IPADS data. That's the official university data that gets reported. And we took a look at race and ethnicity and also by gender. And we feel extremely comfortable that the survey is very representative by race and ethnicity. The numbers do agree. Gender, we do have more women working on campus, and we have over half of the survey respondents identify as women. We have fewer men in the survey, and there are 2 points to make here. Not everybody on the survey actually answered the question on gender, so we have a number of people that we're not in the breakouts by gender. We only know that we have 120 men and 216 women. So yes, we have fewer men. It's also very often the case in social science research that men don't like to take surveys as much as women do. So you always, very often, if you don't insert quotas, you do have more women. But we feel extremely comfortable, all three of us. We have discussed it at length the last 4 months. We really, truly believe that this survey and its results are extremely, really do represent the campus community. All right, let's get going and look at a few of these things. One of the questions was actually what attracted you to work at WU, and main attraction was the small size of the school, the location right here in Monmouth or in Oregon or close to home. And for faculty, of course, the focus on teaching, which was made very, very clear, even by open-ended text. I came here because I really wanted to teach. There's a really great sense of belonging for the most part here at Western. People really do feel like their ideas and their feedback is solicited. They're appropriately involved in the decision-making, their own unit or department. And employees really do feel they can use their full range of skills in their position. And on this slide, the question was literally agreement statements. How much do you agree with the following? And there were some areas that were really identified that can lead to dissatisfaction. And our apologies, we kind of forgot to put a little legend on this table. So if you look at this, red means everybody in here, and the darker gray is faculty, and the lighter gray represents staff. And as you can see, you know, the majority pretty much feels, these are all perceptions, believe that they're underpaid for the work, that there are pay disparities that are quite apparent, and the workload is too heavy, and the work-life balance is less than perfect. Not a very good life balance. And good work-life balance was another big motivator for employees to start here at WU. Also, looking at the question, why would you leave VU? Have you ever thought about leaving VU? Here are some top 5 reasons. Salary issues, not getting paid enough. Do not feel my work is appreciated. No career advancement. Co-work attention. And if you look at the graph, work not appreciated, staff and faculty are pretty much in agreement here. The no career advancement opportunities is more apparent for staff who feels stronger about the lack of career advancement. Co-work attention, again, is felt almost equally by faculty and staff. Feeling of not belonging, again, is a little higher among staff. And about 1 in 5 actually indicated they had not considered leaving. Now, we do also want to say right here, the question was literally, what are the reasons? Have you considered leaving? What were the reasons? It did not ask, did you consider leaving the university, let's say, the last 6 months, the last 12 months? There was no time frame attached to it. So it is actually really possible that somebody 5 years ago thought, I'm going to leave here, and here's the reason why. We don't know that. All we know is how the question was asked, and this is what people indicated. So I think we think this is a very strong point to make. But also, again, if you go look again at the prior slide, what comes out are salary issues, heavy workload, work not appreciated, no advancement, and salary issues. So the two of them, here's where I'm dissatisfied, and here's why I want to leave. They go hand in hand. They're actually pretty much the same thing here. The reasons for dissatisfaction, leave to people also considering leaving WU and going somewhere else. So that was our first theme, literally, was working at WU. And so we have some conclusions and some recommendations. And again, this pertains actually to the whole survey, because as we went through the whole survey, we, of course, formed our own thoughts, and all 3 of us have discussed this at length, actually, for the last 4 months. And we feel, putting all the survey questions together, looking at the totality of the survey, also reading the open ends, and there were plenty of those, we truly feel, based on the answers, that campus members do not feel like they're being heard or appreciated. They feel the recognitions of the hard work is missing, and these beliefs actually can lead to burnout, of course, among employees if you don't feel like you're appreciated or your hard work isn't recognized. So our recommendation is, of course, recognize the hard work by the following items: honest and timely performance evaluation, and we'll talk about performance evaluation a little bit more later on. Since pay disparities are perceived to exist on campus, let's talk about them. Let's look at them. Let's look at unequal workloads and address these disparities. Examine service loads, committee breakdowns, and especially look at those by race, ethnicity, and also by gender. So again, these are our recommendations to improve the campus climate and open up communication. And communication actually is our next theme or topic, and it actually is the one topic, the one theme that runs through everything, no matter where you look at the survey, no matter what we recommend. It always comes back to communication, open communication, and dialogue. It is the dominant theme that runs through all our recommendations. If people don't feel like they're being heard, it can actually lead to, why even bother? If nobody listens to me, why do I make the best effort? Why bother? And another thing that we really did pay attention to, there were a lot of questions on here where our employees actually answered with neutral they didn't agree, they didn't disagree, they were just kind of neutral, or they indicated are not applicable for an answer. It's this almost blasé, I don't care kind of attitude that we felt coming out. It's like resignation, not a strong feeling. And again, that is a communication issue. So let's look at a few examples. Again, a series of questions asked them the agreement on what they think about performance evaluations, public announcement, et cetera, et cetera. And if you look at that, we have not close to 60% saying the performance evaluations are fair. Under 50% believe that performance expectations are not clearly communicated. And even fewer actually feel that people work together as a team. Public announcements are, for the most part, really not seen as truthful and honest. There's a very low response here, agreement response. And also equitable administration of discipline of policies and codes of ethics is also not very high. Staff especially focused on lack of communication, performance expectations, and the evaluations of their performance. It is definitely an area of concern to staff. And our conclusions here and recommendations, again, we perceived a sense of recognition and perceived inequity, and without, clear communications are needed to address this issue. And our recommendation is improve communication across units, not just within units. Recognize that changes within a unit can affect others on campus. That is why communication is so important. Give timely and fair performance evaluations, and again, communicate and discuss performance expectations, open the dialogue. We think mandatory focused training for supervisors is needed to address, for example, performance evaluations and how to start them and how to communicate with staff members. And again, also, timely and transparent communication must be modeled by our leadership. All right, next topic, diversity. Big chunk of the survey was, of course, devoted to diversity on campus. And it is very, very clear that the campus is actually embracing the idea of diversity, that we are behind it, but there is a lot more work to be done. Over half of the campus views multiculturalism as a core value, but only 20% feel we adequately fund it. Employees of color are less likely to see the campus as welcoming to non-whites. And women overall perceive more inequities along the whole spectrum of questions, actually. And again, we can only show a few examples here. And so here are some, hopefully this is clear enough. There was one question in the survey that asked the employees if they considered themselves a person of color. If they said yes, they got follow-up questions, and again, it was an agreement scale. How much do you agree? 3/4 say they feel treated with respect by students. That drops down to about just under 60% they are treated with respect by faculty, and only half of them feel welcome in the surrounding community. And the very last one is employees of color are well represented on our diversity council. Only like 1/4 agree with that statement, and we'll actually get back to the diversity council a bit later. So again, also, we then went ahead and we made a new binary variable out of this. There was a race ethnicity question on the survey, and but the numbers for non-white were small enough, so we just created a new variable, and we called it either white if they identified as white Caucasians, and non-white if they're identified in any other way. That also ensures confidentiality if you treat it at that level. And both white and non-white and every other group actually really does feel it extremely important that we promote diversity and inclusion to the campus leadership. When asked how well does the campus actually do on promoting racial or cultural interactions on campus between different groups, we're not doing so well, especially among non-whites. Only 44% think the campus is doing well on this, compared to about 56% of whites. So again, we have a way to go. One really interesting finding to us was also the lack of knowledge that WHO actually has a strategic diversity plan. If you look at it, do you know that WHO has a strategic diversity plan? Don't know is the most common answer. They either don't know it, or they flat out say no, or they just plain and simple don't know. And faculty actually is even less likely than staff to be aware of the diversity plan. And again, that is communication and raising awareness. Now, here is a slide that truly shows that pretty much everybody on campus is in agreement on one topic. We all need mandatory diversity training. Faculty agrees, staff agrees, everybody wants it for administrators, for faculty, not everybody, almost everybody, for the governing board, for the search committee heads, and for staff members, and about 70% also want students to receive some diversity training. I think that's a very strong finding that we all, as a campus, are in agreement that we welcome diversity, but we need to do a bit more work on it. Again, some conclusions. Majority does feel the campus needs diversity training. Also, another finding that we found, employees of colors have experienced or have seen more discrimination, harassment based on race. And another really interesting finding, and this goes again for various groups, people of color, people with disability, and LGBTs here on campus among employees, they perceive that they are not represented well on the Diversity Council, which is clearly a topic that needs to be discussed. Which could very well be true also to the fact that they are not very aware of that we have such a diversity council. But what we recommend more than anything else is an in-person mandatory training on diversity. Research does show that in-person training works a lot better than online training. We actually further even recommend to do it more than once a year. Gender differences. We looked at gender difference for every single question. We have found many differences in many areas, and just again, just highlighting it here, from the work environment to diversity to discrimination and bullying, women actually perceive more adverse effects. An example is that women that are employed on campus for more than 5 years are actually more likely to perceive a hostile work environment. Women are actually also less likely to agree that the campus is integrated, and women are more likely to feel higher workloads and that their work is less appreciated, and they're actually also more likely than men to say everybody needs diversity training. So let's look at, again, just a few of those differences. If you look at that, men are the red bars, women are the gray bars, and workload too heavy, work not appreciated, women score higher, meaning more women agree with that statement. Women are a bit less likely to be satisfied with their interactions with other employees. And then the last two findings, the last two bars, go back to diversity, integration of meetings with faculty or with administrators. Fewer women feel these types of meetings are actually fully integrated here on campus. Now, to show these differences in percentages a bit more clearer, the next slide uses the same topics again: work not appreciated, workload too heavy, where about 10%, 9 to 10% of women agree more with their workload is too heavy, the work is not appreciated. Now look at the other three bars that go down, and they're in the negative, which means, for example, integration of meetings with administrators. There's a 22% difference between men and women, with 22% fewer women agreeing with that we are integrated in those meetings. And we just thought showing this kind of graphs really shows the striking differences in some of the gender differences that we notice in the survey. Quite a difference in perception between male and female. And that holds for staff, and that holds for faculty. Again, let's go straight into harassment, discrimination, bullying, you name it. This is again comparing men and women, and women are more likely to say they have experienced or seen, witnessed bullying, gender harassments. They are much more likely to have experienced microaggressions. They're more likely to say it's a hostile work environment, even though the number is not very big. And they're also, again, more likely than men to say they have experienced co-worker tension or tension with their co-workers. And again, looking at it a bit differently at the same topics and just showing the differences in percentages here, you can really see the marked difference between men and women. I mean, look at microaggressions. Women are much more likely to say they have experienced microaggression. That's an 18-point difference, and that's quite remarkable. And again, looking at the totality of the survey, looking at all the questions together, we again get the feeling and the perception that women feel disenfranchised, they feel overworked, they feel underappreciated, and that does not make for satisfied employees. And this is definitely especially apparent among women who have worked at WU for longer periods of time, namely over 5 years. Now, also, microaggression and tension with coworkers are definitely felt more by women. As we said before, we do recommend mandatory training for diversity, and we really do think that needs an added topic. Gender equity needs to be covered in mandatory training. Next theme was discrimination and harassment on campus. And as you can see, all these themes actually work together, as we just saw the gender differences. In total, 71% of the survey respondents, the campus community, said they either experienced or witnessed at least one incident. And 40% said they either saw or experienced bullying. And I do want to point out here that the survey did not make a differentiation between did you experience bullying or did you witness bullying. These are clearly two different things, and we were not able to differentiate. It was one question. The microaggressions, the 45% was a different question, so that was experience, direct experience. Incidents were actually, it's a very low reporting of these incidents. Actually, by just 1 in 4 said they have reported. Again, it is probably because it's not clear if they actually were the intended victim or if they witnessed it by somebody else. We can't tell. But the belief among those that did not report is it gets dismissed. There's no support from my university, and actually 1 in 4 actually said I did not report because I was afraid I would lose my job. And let's look at it a bit in more detail. Again, we break it out by total, by faculty and by staff, and clearly bullying is experienced by about 40% in total. There is also discrimination, bias, harassment based on lack of English proficiency, namely an accent, that staff reports more than, faculty reports more than staff. Staff sees more religion-affiliated based discrimination, and overall, women are more likely to indicate any type of incident. Asking actually who was the instigator, who was the cause of such an incident. We have to say that faculty was listed more often than others. Faculty members actually list fellow faculty members the most, 80%. Of course, faculty works with faculty, staff works with staff, so it is natural and we can expect it that staff is more likely to say a fellow staff member was the instigator of the incident. But the numbers are still striking, that faculty overall, 58% in total that faculty started whatever the incident was. Conclusions again. We noticed before that campus employees do ask for mandatory diversity training, but we do strongly recommend that this, whatever training it is, really does include various topics, not just diversity, as it very often pertains to race and ethnicity only. It needs to include topics like, harassment and bullying, and definitely gender-based harassment. There needs to be a very clear path for reporting. The question the survey did ask who they reported it to, and it's not from a friend, from my dean, my supervisor, all the way to HR. It just was not very clear. And there should be guidelines with very specific steps of how to report, and because we really do want to alleviate the fear of retaliation or the belief that nothing will happen. And one more topic, there is definitely a need to address performance and merit evaluations. 58% feel that the performance evaluations on campus are fair. Only 27% believe merit and promotion processes are actually fair. That's a very low number. 46%, again, less than half, believe that performance expectations are clearly defined. And just 41% of the faculty that answered the survey view the tenure process as fair. And only 50% of staff say they have a performance evaluation on a regular basis. And again, staff, less than 1 in 5 feel that the merit and promotion process is fair. Again, asking if the evaluations, the performance evaluation are done for staff on a consistent or regular basis. The whole slide is about that. This is a really good example. Here you can also see how we looked at men and women separately, and then further split them down by those who were employed for 5 or fewer years versus those who are on campus for over 5 years. There's definitely a distinct gender difference. Overall, only half say their evaluation is done regularly. If you look at it, over 60% of women who have been here for longer periods of time agree that they have been done on a regular basis, while the lowest agreement is actually by men that have been here for 5 or fewer years, where not even 20% thinks it's done on a regular basis. Conclusions again, we need to allow and look for better and fairer increases that consider merit. Again, start a broader conversation, which brings us right back to communication. This communication, this dialogue must address perceived unfairness. And again, this is what employees perceive. Okay, that is their belief, which we will not want to negate. When we have such dialogues or such conversation, it really should include all constituents, administrations, unions, human resources, and various other campus groups. Also clearly explain the type of comparisons that are used as a basis for salary and merit increases. Again, have open communications and apply the standards equally, and the same standards apply to all. And now, final thoughts. The report, of course, is a lot longer than this presentation, and we do urge you to spend a whole weekend going through the 200 pages and looking at it. It's quite lengthy. But it did identify some strong points that do need to be addressed. But we also want to stress the point that we think these can be addressed. I said before, I mentioned it before, that we feel the sense of resignation and apathy, and that can be changed. It's not so much anger, actually, Also, there is so much low agreement on some of these questions, and it can be a sign of lack of awareness. Again, this is communication. Open communication, clear communication, open dialogue, trust, to us at least, seems to be the key to solving most issues and is clearly perceived to be lacking. Final recommendations once more: start open conversations, broaden communication, input not just from higher administration, but also from other campus groups. And then we strongly advocate that allow a year or two, redo a survey, a shorter survey, a more concise survey, better designed survey, include campus members in the design of this survey, and go out and survey employees again and see if any actions that have been taken coming out of the current survey, if things have changed. A different survey can measure that, and we're hoping that it rekindles the enthusiasm that working at WU should bring. Thank you. And now I'm going to hand it over to Rob for any questions that have come in.
Great, thank you, Sybil. One question that came in was, when can we expect to have access to these presentation slides? And so we have a PDF version of that, and I believe that Luann Vickers in the President's office is going to be sending those out. I wouldn't be surprised if they even come out before we are done here today. So the presentation slides are on their way to everybody who was invited to this call. I think it's nearly 80 people. So that's one question. If you have additional questions, please email them to provost@wou.edu. And then we have one more question at this point. I'll refresh my email, but I thought President Fuller had convened a diversity advisory committee. What is happening with that committee? I think that refers to UDIAC, University Diversity Inclusion Advisory Committee. So I'll defer to President Fuller for that question.
Yes, thank you. Actually, it's a reformulation of the former University Diversity Committee. It's now called University Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Committee, and it was formalized last year. And one of its chief responsibilities was to work on a diversity strategic plan, which has actually been developed this spring. So between the survey dates and now that committee, this new committee, has revisited that issue with the goal of developing a plan, which is now in draft mode. And I believe that plan has been shared with the Staff Senate and the Faculty Senate. Cabinet's had one conversation about that plan as well. In the composition of that committee, it includes a liaison from the Cabinet. It includes a representative from Finance and Administration. Student Affairs has 3 representatives. The Provost's office and group have 1. The Deans of Education and Liberal Arts and Sciences are on the committee, or at least there's a designee. There's a representative from the VP and General Counsel's office, which includes Human Resources. Faculty Senate has an appointment on the committee. Staff Senate, ASWU, Housing, Athletics, Marketing Communication, and then there's one at large. And the current membership can be found on the website that is, the university website, and you can see the membership, the actual members of that committee who are currently on that committee. And they have 3 co-chairs. Those co-chairs are Gabby Boyle, and we have, I think, Jacqueline Cares Hurley, and then Octavius Gillespie Bennett are the 3 co-chairs. And that is an active committee, although with COVID, I think they've taken a bit of a break. And our big topic is to take a look at the diversity plan. They've also suggested a land acknowledgement statement. So that's the current status of that particular group. The former University Diversity Council had a major role in things such as Martin Luther King holiday, and this committee now is more focused on policies and procedures, and will be a major audience for the report that Sybil just referred to.
Thank you, President Fuller. We are getting some more questions coming in. This might be more directed to Judy Vanderberg. The question is, staff have been told that management is unable to require mandatory training for supervisors. Can you speak to this? Is that a question that you might be able to field, Judy?
Mandatory. We don't have mandatory. Supervisors can be requested by their supervisors to come to training, but we don't have a set mandatory training. So it can be required in performance evaluations by a supervisor's supervisor.
Okay, thank you, Judy. I'm getting a number of questions about whether this is being recorded and shared broadly. We are not recording this, but we will be sharing the PDF of the presentation. And I just received an email from Luann, and she said she'll send that out at the conclusion of the presentation. There was also a question about the full report, if that will be made available to campus broadly. I don't know the answer to that question. Judy, Rex, any thoughts on that?
Well, my feeling is that we asked for this analysis, and so the report should be available to anyone who needs to look at it. I think we probably put it on our website for our internal constituents, and I don't know if Judy can add to that, but perhaps we can put it either on the HR website, or we'll find a location and get that identified. But I will also defer to Sybil and the researchers, but my sense is it should be available to the internal audience here that would be behind our portal.
Well, and I think I speak for all 3 of us that we expected that it would be available. You pretty much hired us to do the analysis and write this report, and my understanding is that you did it to get this dialogue going and, improve what needs improving. And in our opinion, the report is the start of this, and it should be available to the campus community, maybe just like Judy's work on this campus survey sits on the portal.
Well, we were going to put it, it'll be available in the same portal spot as the rest of the campus survey materials are.
Excellent. That makes a lot of sense. So we will get this on the portal next to the other campus climate survey, so the campus community will have access to it. A great solution.
There's one other thing, Rob. This is actually, this presentation is being recorded.
Okay. Then there's a question, what are our plans for future climate surveys? I think that, I've heard a little bit of this conversation. I'll let others chime in. That we wanted to have a little bit of time pass and then do the same, or as Sybil suggested, a similar survey that could possibly be improvements. From my social science background, I think we'd want to be able to make survey-to-survey comparisons, so to design a survey that way. But I think the plan was to do that in another year or two, possibly again in the spring. I don't know if anybody has anything else to add to that.
Well, I'll jump in while others think about it. That was clearly my intention all along when we commissioned the idea of doing the surveys in 2019, is that it would create a benchmark. I love the recommendation that is in the report that perhaps the next step is to use this experience to design an instrument that's more carefully tuned to our issues. These were national studies. The questions never fit perfectly. When you do that, I see some of my researchers nodding. So I love the recommendation that is in the report. It says maybe we use this as a platform for having a conversation about developing an instrument, and maybe every 2 years is about right, so that you can measure change and see where you're making headway and hopefully progress in all categories. But you may discover areas where you've slipped back a bit as well. So I think that's exactly how we use evidence and results to improve our climate and our performance.
Excellent, thank you. Another question. This is begins with a statement. This is a huge amount of work. I'm so appreciative of the work that these three have put in and the administration for supporting this analysis of the data. What is the next step in these conversations? I feel like this presentation has created some momentum, and it would be nice to have a set time in the future where we'll to talk about implementation of these recommendations.
Well, I think in terms of the audience that was invited, I have a lawnmower going here, so I'll try to speak over it. But we have members of University Council on the call. We have Staff Senate, Faculty Senate. We have cabinet members. My sense is that we would need to have this report be vetted by the various governance groups that have an interest in this topic. And University Council can be a place where that is sort of coordinated, I guess is a word I'll use. But I think the idea is for all of us to look at this and ask the questions, what are some of the policy steps that we need to engage in? Mandatory training being top of mind in the report. What are the steps we can take toward doing a better job with regard to search and screening committees, just to pick one of the many findings in the report. But I think this is the platform from which we now have to identify action steps and then build that into responsibilities.
Excellent, thank you. And there's some overlap in these questions. We might have already addressed this, but I'm just going to throw this question out, and then I'm happy to kind of respond, although I think it's been partly responded to. Will there be a response to these findings and recommendations from the provost/president with plans on how these things might be addressed? One of the things that I would just point out is, we did the survey last spring, and we've actually had quite a few presentations. I think I've seen Judy give a similar type of PowerPoint with a few of the analyses that the center did. I've seen it at least three times, if not more. And a lot of this work, a lot of these discoveries have already been affecting the work that we are doing. For example, with communication, I hope it's clear that particularly now in this time of crisis, but even before that we have erred on the side of being maximally transparent and sharing as much information as possible. So I think a lot of this work has been done. I think the work about, and it will continue to be done, the findings related to diversity have also been discussed at great length. The University Diversity Inclusion Advisory Committee, their work, I believe, has also been informed about this, and around the cabinet that we have at the table, we've been very aware of this. So I think some of this has been done, and the idea is to continue the conversation to help us make progress. And another question was, is there a reason why only a small portion of employees were invited to watch this presentation? We did invite approximately 80 people, and we were actually trying to reach out to the governance groups that had seen the survey and had asked questions. So as Judy previously had gone to various groups, including Faculty Senate, Staff Senate, and other groups, there were questions, and that was one of the reasons we wanted to do the deeper analysis. And so that was the response to that. The other thing too is we were originally just planning on doing a WebEx, but we kept inviting more and more people to the point of potentially having an unstable web call. So that's why we have changed the format there.
If I can echo what Rob just said, again, to his point, we had an initial review of some of these findings, and they were presented to the groups that Rob identified. And each one of those groups said that they wanted to do a more complete analysis. That led us to reach out to Sybil. I think in her work, she reached out and had conversations with all of those group leaders in doing the design, if you will, of the study. And so I see this as a first step of bringing this out to a broader audience. I think the UDAC is a primary audience for this report. And I think that's one of the key next steps. As I look at their charge was twofold: develop a plan and then begin to take leadership and identify action steps that would improve campus climate. That's item number 2 on their charge that was established over a year ago. So I think this is the beginning of that work.
I'm going to read this question, but I'm actually going to I'd like to kind of change this question. We'll answer it, then possibly see if Sybil, Pat, or Beryl might be able to address it. The question is, will we be able to look at the data by gender and role, that is faculty or staff? Are there large enough ends for that? So I would ask Sybil, is that data in the report in a way that could provide further information to people? And I'm also just wondering if Sybil, you or people on your team might address any observations in the data by gender and role.
Pat, would you like to take it?
Sure. One of the issues with why we didn't do those types of analyses is the questions related to role were you're allowed to check multiple roles. So it's very difficult to break apart what each individual was doing or what they're doing within the past 3 or 4 years. And I'll use faculty as an example. We wanted to break out by, say, non-tenure track, tenure track, and tenured, but the question was asked in such a way that you had people who would click, say, non-tenure track, tenure track, and so like, how do we break that person apart into which way are they answering this question? Also, sometimes they didn't answer those parts of the question. They would answer if they're part-time or full-time. And so the question itself was quite muddied and made it difficult to break apart by a much deeper part of roles. Staff is even more difficult because it wasn't just roles, it was just kind of where did you work? And so it'd be I'd say computing services or administration or something like that. So it's much more difficult to pick apart what the role actually is for that individual. And so we just didn't, to be honest, we didn't have much faith in either of those variables to apply any analyses to.
Great. Thank you, Pat. Given the findings, are there any discussions about including, quote, demonstrating a commitment to diversity, end quote, as a formal criteria for tenure and promotion? I'd be happy to hear other people's opinion on this. To have it be a formal criteria for tenure and promotion, it probably would need to be bargained into the collective bargaining agreement, at least the way our CDA is currently set up. I do think, with that said, I do think that division PRCs, college deans, and provosts can emphasize the importance of that. And that can be done immediately just by how we evaluate people and then when we write letters of support. I'd be interested to hear what President Fuller's opinion on this is. or any other. But I think that can be done beginning at the division level, but formally baking it into the criteria, the requirements for tenure and promotion, that might require edits to the collective bargaining agreement.
Well, I think you've got it largely right. It does need to be vetted through the contract. And then in some contracts that I've seen, there are categories of a broad category of collegiality that also sometimes addresses these issues. There's also a bullying appendix in the current contract, or workplace safety, I guess it's healthy workplace, I think is the name of the current appendix. Those are all pieces that might be the platform. And I think what those criteria, one of the keys is clear communication of what that means and how they'll be evaluated, as part of that process. But the faculty are key to this conversation about what's required for promotion and tenure. Those are part of the heart of peer review, which is at the base of the P&T process.
I also would like to respond to what is called Appendix F, healthy workplace. So this is related to bullying and other behaviors from faculty. It's in the faculty agreement. And, this is a difficult thing to communicate to the campus community, but I think it is important for people to realize that, that academic affairs and the college deans have been responding, I would say, in a very timely and a robust way to complaints that come in ways that I have never seen at Western before. There's no way it's not appropriate to say, oh, we got a complaint, this is what we did, this is what the disciplinary action is. Some of that might get out to people through other channels, from the faculty member who might be disciplined. But I think that is important to tell people that has happened. And I hope that is having a positive effect on our workplace. That is it for the questions that have come in. I think there was one question that had a lot of overlap, so I didn't read that. But I've read all the questions that came in, and we got another one. So I'll read this. Given the strong recommendation to initiate mandatory training, parenthetically more than one, have there been discussions about carving out funding for this in the fiscal year 21 budget?
I'll ask Judy to help with this response, but there was a UBAC proposal, University Budget Advisory Committee, that's UBAC, that included support for modules that would be related to various topics in human resources. That was highly regarded by the UBAC process, and is at least on the list of 8 items that is still under consideration as we try to build the 21 budget. What I don't know is whether this topic is addressed by that particular module that has been recommended by the HR staff. And so at that point, I might ask Judy to join in. And if not, we can research that to see if these topics align with that particular approach.
Yes, it is part of what we requested, both the supervisory training, but then mandatory training for these various topics. So that's part of that request, but those, of course, are modules, online modules. As far as in-person training, that's been a discussion I've had with various people, but again, it's something that would take some funding, probably. But yes, those things are under discussion, and they've been requested.
Great. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, President Fuller. Any final comments from anybody? Sybil, Pat, Beryl?
Well, it was an interesting undertaking that required a lot of time. I think we're very grateful that we got the opportunity to do it. And we do hope that our report and the presentation will help you make decisions that can, foster a great environment at WU. Pat, Beryl, any additional thoughts from you guys? No?
I'll say I'm grateful to be part of the group to work on this analysis because I wasn't here when the survey was done. So I wouldn't say I got a bad picture or a negative picture, but I got a wholesome picture of the new environment that I came to. So I'm really grateful for this opportunity.
No more questions have come in. President Fuller, would you like to make the final comments?
Yeah, thanks, Rob, for doing that. And thanks for your work as moderator and MC. I really appreciate the way you were deftly going through the questions and getting them to the various members of the panel. And I, too, would want to thank the team for the work. I think the report, both the PowerPoint and then the almost 200-page report that Rob referred to, does give us ample room for conversation. I think a lot of governance groups need to read this and have conversations. I think there's a time for faculty senate or staff senate to invite people to come back and talk about key issues. I think the launch pad for this will be the draft diversity plan that is just now being vetted on campus. So in terms of series of steps, I see this report being a catalyst for helping us design the diversity plan to be aligned with what seems to be the key issues that need the most attention going forward. So if you go back and read the strategic plan, one of the key principles of that is trying to make decisions that are evidence-based. And I think what we have here is a lot of information that gives us a platform to look in the mirror and say, how can we have an environment that learns and gets better so that 2 years from now, we see vast improvement in some of these areas. And so I see that as part of continuous improvement and assessment. And these are themes that we all have been embracing here during my time with all of you here at Western. So I want to thank the research team. I want to thank the leaders on this call for engaging Sybil and her team to do the type of analysis that I think we're going to have a chance to really digest more fully as we think about the reports in the next few weeks. So with that, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.